Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to intelligently manage your data across on-premise and cloud storage using Komprise. First, a little bit of background on us. Komprise is based in Silicon Valley, California. The core team here at Komprise is passionate about how you can better manage data. This is our third business in the data and storage markets. And we essentially built Komprise a few years back based on customer feedback. Customers told us they were drowning in data and wanted a simpler way to manage data efficiently across their storage environments. And that's how Komprise was born. The Komprise product is shipping and is in the hands of several customers across industries, and we'll cover some of those use cases a little bit later. Our customers include many of the multi-petabyte environments across the Fortune 500, and today Komprise manages almost 100 petabytes of data across these environments. We were recently chosen by Gartner as a co-vendor in storage technologies because Gartner truly believes that there's an underserved market today in managing today's scale of data, and they see the innovations that Komprise has created to address that market. So here are the challenges that customers tell us that they face. Data is growing really fast, as we all might have seen. A lot of the world's data has been created pretty recently. I think 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years, and that growth is continuing to escalate. But with all this data growth, IT budgets are still staying pretty flat. And already a significant amount of the IT budget, 25 to 40% of the budget in most environments, is being used to store and manage data. And so most companies, their CIOs, are asking IT to do more with the same. How can you manage all the data growth without growing the IT budget? And so from an IT practitioner's perspective, this is a big challenge because there's a lot of innovation out there in the storage market, all the way from high performance solutions like flash to cheap and deep capacity solutions like the cloud and object storage. You have a lot of variety of storage that you can take advantage of, but the real question is, how can you leverage all these different technologies without changing the user experience, without creating disruption for users and applications, and still come in within budget? So this is a big challenge. How do you do more with the same, leverage various technologies without getting locked in, and do all of this without creating a lift and shift, without causing disruption to users? So today we're going to show you how Komprise helps you address these challenges. So before we go further, one of the perspectives that we'd like you to have is, what has happened in the market? Data footprints are rapidly growing, and the growth of data has escalated significantly in the last few years, but there has not been that much innovation in the data management market. Most of the data management solutions today were built over a decade ago and were built before there was such an onslaught of data. And so they're really costly and complex solutions that are pretty hard to deploy and hard to operate. So many of them are pretty expensive. They require a lot of on-premise resources. They are piece solution, so there may be a different module that analyzes data, a different module that moves data. It's not a cohesive solution. They're hard to scale. They often use a lot of proprietary technology. They put agents on the storage, or they use things like static stub files, all of which have problems. So overall, it's costly, complex, brittle solutions that are hard to scale. And Komprise addresses these issues because essentially what we've done is built a solution from the ground up to address the modern scale of data, so that the solution is really simple to deploy, minimal in its footprint, and it scales on demand with your needs. So with that background, let me actually show you what the Komprise solution looks like. To deploy Komprise is really simple. All you need to do is bring up a Komprise virtual machine, which we call the Komprise Observer, in your environment. So literally, if you wanted to try Komprise, we would give you this virtual machine, you would power it on in your environment, and then you would just point it at your storage. And within minutes, it doesn't matter, what kind of NAS storage you have, any storage that has NFS or SMB CIFS access to it is storage that we can look at. So you would point Komprise at that storage. So it could be NetApp filers, EMC filers, HNAS, Windows file servers. It really doesn't matter. Any storage that has NFS or SMB path to it is storage that Komprise can look at. You would literally just point Komprise at that storage, and within minutes, Komprise shows you how much of your data is hot, how much of your data is cold, how fast the data is growing, and all kinds of usage statistics on who's using this data. And with all this information, you can then set different policies, and you could say, well, okay, I see that half my data is cold. What if I move that data to something cheaper? And you could set those policies, and as you do that, Komprise projects for you how much you're going to save. So essentially, this is a solution that gives you a single view into your data across your storage in minutes, even on petabytes of data, and then gives you an interactive ROI projection based on your data management policies. And you can set different policies on when to actively archive or tier data versus when to replicate data, copy data, etc. And based on your policies, Komprise gives you the savings. And then if you like everything that you see, then you can activate the plan, and then Komprise actually moves the data as well. So this is an analytics-driven data management solution. It analyzes data across your storage, and then it projects for you your savings based on your policies, and then it actually moves and replicates data based on your policies. And when it moves and replicates data, some of the key differentiators with how the solution works are that it doesn't sit in front of your data path. So Komprise actually sits behind your data path, so there's no change to hot data. Hot data requests still go to your primary file system. The primary file system responds to them, and Komprise is nowhere in that picture. And only when it comes to data that Komprise moved, only then is Komprise in the picture, and that is pretty infrequent. It's usually less than 5% of the time. And then Komprise gives you access to that data no matter where that data is sitting. It might be sitting as objects in the cloud. It might be sitting on an object storage system as objects. It might be sitting on tape. It might be sitting on cheaper disk. And Komprise gives you a seamless file-based access to all that moved data. And so for users, the moved data looks like it's all still there. So here I'm showing you a Windows Explorer view into a folder from which we have moved data, and the files in the red rectangle are the files that we've moved. And as you can see here in the before and the after, the folder looks the same. The red rectangle was added by us so that you could see what data moved. But other than that, there's no real change. So for your users, they don't even have to worry that some files are sitting on a NAS, some files are sitting in a cloud, some files are sitting on object storage, etc. They don't know any of that. They just see all their files exactly as before. There's no change for them in their behavior. Maybe some of the files have a little more latency in getting the data back, but other than that, there's really no change to the user or application access. So they don't have to change their paradigm. They don't have to write an object-based application to access this data. They don't have to do any of that. So that's another big benefit of this solution. It gives you transparent access to moved data without using traditional stubs. And what's the problem with stubs? Well, as many of you may know, traditionally when products move data, they would leave behind a stub file, which was a pointer to the new location of that data. And the problem with that stub file is because it's static, if that file were ever to get corrupted or deleted, there was no way of getting to your data. So data could get orphaned. Or if you wanted to move the data again, then the stub would need to be updated, otherwise it wouldn't point to the right place. So managing stubs was a big nightmare. With Komprise, you don't have any of those issues. The stubs themselves are fully replaceable, and they are not pointing to the actual data. They're just like a dynamic reference, like a URL pointer. And the actual disintermediation of that stub is happening at runtime. So even if the stub were to get deleted or corrupted, the Komprise link, Komprise can repopulate them. And so essentially you have a very resilient dynamic architecture to manage your move data transparently, leveraging standard file system protocols with none of the issues of the traditional environments. So in a nutshell, some of the key differentiators for Komprise are that it's really simple to get Komprise going because it requires no storage agents. It really runs just as a virtual machine. There's no dedicated hardware needed. It's not invasive to your environment. It doesn't use static stubs. It doesn't change your hot data path. And also the solution is adaptive. It adjusts to your environment. So you don't have to manage, the system and turn it off when you have peak usage from other systems and things like that. There's no SLA management needed. Komprise adapts to your environment and adjusts to the load on your network and your file systems. And it's really simple to get going. There's no upfront costs to deploying the solution. There's no big investment you have to make. Just buy virtual machines and scale as you grow. And there's no scaling limits. There's no central database that limits your scalability. It's not a client-server architecture. There's no single bottleneck anywhere in the system. The other thing is there's no lock-in. You're not locked into any environment. You can pick any storage you want that uses NFS, SMB CIFS, or REST S3 APIs. So any cloud storage, object storage, NAS storage are all storage that you can use with Komprise. And the data that we move, you can have full native access to that data, meaning that if we move data to a cloud, for example, you can access that data directly in the cloud without going through Komprise and without going through your source filer. So you're essentially, the freedom of your data is fully protected. There is no lock-in to any environment. So the architecture of Komprise is a scale-out architecture, so meaning that as your demand grows, you can add more of these observer virtual machines, and Komprise automatically scales and load balances the workload across those virtual machines. These virtual machines also provide redundancy to one another, meaning that if one virtual machine fails, another virtual machine picks up its slack. So they're fault tolerant and work across one another. So essentially, this is a true scale-out architecture, much like the cloud. It has no central bottlenecks. There's no central master controller or database that's limiting how this environment scales. And it's working across all your storage because we're not putting any agents on your storage. We're not making any modifications to your source environments or your destination environments. And Komprise is just managing the data. It does have a console that it presents, and that console by default runs in the cloud, but you can also run it on-premise. So with this background, I'm actually going to switch and show you a very quick demo of how the solution works, and then we'll come back to the slides. So I'm just bringing up the demo screen here. And essentially, in this demo, what we're going to show you is how simple it is to connect Komprise to your storage environment and start understanding what's happening to your own data. To do that, what we would do is first bring in the Komprise Observer virtual machine, power it on, and once we power it on, we get taken to this console. And in this console, we're first going to add all the storage that we have in our environment so that Komprise can look at it. So here, we've added Isilon system. We've added some NetApp 8 clusters, some NetApp 7s, some Windows servers, some NetApp 9s, etc. So to connect to different storage, literally you would just give the IP address of that storage, give Komprise access credentials to the storage, click on Discover Shares, find the shares on that filer, and click on the ones you want to look at. And once you do that, Komprise starts showing you what's happening to your data across all that storage. Even when you have petabytes of data and billions of files, within 15 minutes of downloading Komprise, you will start seeing analytics. And that's because of the algorithms that Komprise uses. Komprise essentially creates these sparse computational cubes as it builds up its analysis so that it's very fast in how it shows you results, and yet it's completely non-intrusive to your storage environment. Komprise is fully running in the background and not consuming active cycles on your storage. So when you bring Komprise, you've pointed it at your storage, within 15 minutes you start seeing analytics, and what you see first is just a summary view of what's happening to your data, how much of your data is hot and how much of your data is cold. So here you see that we have 195 terabytes of data across 5 shares. And when we look at this data, there's, about 12.5% of this data hasn't been touched in over 3 years. And about a similar amount of data hasn't been touched in over 2 years. And another 25% hasn't been touched in over a year. So if you just added these up, about 65% or so of our data hasn't been touched in a year plus. And then we have some data that's much more recent, that has been accessed recently. So this is the first view we see. And in addition to that, we also see how fast our data is growing. So essentially what this is saying is, if we did nothing, over 3 years, this 195 terabytes is going to be almost 300 terabytes based on the growth rate on these shares. Uh, in addition to that, we get all kinds of usage statistics on our data. So we get to see what kinds of data we have, and for each a distribution by age. And then we can see whether it's big files or small files. So we can see by size what the distribution is like, who's actually using the data, which users, which groups, where the data sits, etc. All kinds of file analytics that helps us better understand what's in our storage. Because when we talk to our customers, many of them say that even though they know that a lot of their data is cold, and even though they know that they could be more efficient with how they manage data, they really don't know why. They don't know what data is actually being used, what's not being used, where is the data footprint actually growing, what impact could they have if they were to streamline its management. All of those are unknown. And so the first thing Komprise does is gives you visibility into this information. So it's showing you how much data you have, how fast it's growing, what data is being used and not being used, and a profile of that data. With all that information, we can actually play with different policies. And as we set our policies, we see projections of the savings that that policy would provide. So we could create different policy groups for our different policies. And within a policy group, we could specify what shares that policy group operates on, and what the policy itself is, and where data should get moved to or replicated to. So for example, we could say, well, what if I moved anything that hasn't been touched in over a year, and I moved it maybe to a bucket in the cloud, but you could also move it to an on-premise share or an object store. And so let's say we want to move anything that's over a year old. As I do that, if you notice, Komprise, this number changed, and it's saying that now about 56% of my data will get moved. And based on this, about 160 terabytes would get freed up. And because all this data is getting moved out of the active footprint, it no longer needs to be replicated and backed up. So there's a second order savings of almost 480 terabytes on this data, and the total cost savings is so much. So all these ROI projections are interactive. As I change my plan, these projections are all updated live, so I can actually see the impact of my different data management policies, and I can decide how I want to manage my system based on the ROI I'm going to get. Um, and once you have seen all this and you like it, you can just say done and activate the plan, and then Komprise actually moves the data based on your policies. And because the system is adaptive, Komprise automatically slows itself down and throttles back when your file system or your network are being used by other applications or users, so that Komprise is like a housekeeper that is running continuously in the background and not taking active cycles in your environment. Hopefully that demo gave you a good understanding of how the product works. It's really, really simple to try the solution. You can get Komprise set up in your own environment in minutes, and all the things I showed you in this demo, you can see for yourself with your own data. The other thing is that, if you look at how much you're spending today on storage and you compare it with how much you could be spending if you leveraged for that same data, especially the cold data, something much cheaper like object storage or cloud, uh, you can actually save pretty significantly. Most customers of ours are looking at about a 70% savings in costs from deploying the solution. Um, our customers tend to be across different data intensive verticals. So whether it's genomics and healthcare or financial services, we have major insurance companies, some of the top 5 insurance companies in the world using Komprise. We have some of the largest gene sequencing companies using Komprise. Government agencies, county government departments, um, the government itself is also a good fit, and as are universities. Engineering environments like Cadence Design Systems, that does electronic design automation engineering. Any of those environments, semiconductor companies where data footprint is growing fast, and there's a lot of legacy data that they have to keep around, are all good fits, as are media and entertainment and oil and gas. And we have customer deployments across all these verticals, and our footprint is rapidly growing in these different environments. Some of the use cases that our customers use us for are first, to get insights into what's happening to their data so they can better plan how they're going to grow their capacity. They can do a mix of more higher performance storage plus cost efficient storage like object or cloud, and they can plan where they want to use what using Komprise. The other thing our customers use us a lot for is to take the cold data from their primary storage environments and put it into something cheaper. And today, because of how good the different secondary storage options have become, you don't really need to archive as you did in the olden days. It's not that when you're moving data to this archive, it's becoming inaccessible and it's a big change to your users. Instead, what we are enabling is something that's much more active. It's almost a transparent archive. It's an archive that is seamlessly attached to your primary storage, and it's as if you virtually extended that capacity without any real changes to users or applications. The other thing is that, as we all know, um, storing data is just a small part of the problem. A lot of the time and money spent on data is in protecting it and managing it. And so the Komprise not only helps you lower the cost of storing the data, but more importantly, it helps you lower the cost of managing it by doing things like this active archiving, by replicating to a much cheaper target of your choice, so that you have data replication and protection and DR, but at a fraction of the cost that you would have otherwise. And also, the other use case that customers often start with is using Komprise to help them get a foot in the cloud. Maybe you want to start leveraging the cloud, but writing new cloud-native applications is tough. You could use Komprise to just seamlessly start leveraging the cloud and you still have file-based users and applications accessing all that data and over time grow your cloud footprint. So these are some of the common use cases that our customers use us for. And as an example, we have pretty large customers across different industries. This is a massive, major financial services company where we help them manage petabytes of data across thousands of NetApp and EMC shares. And in their case, over 60% of that data we're moving out to a cheaper object storage. Similarly, genomics is another market that's growing really fast. This is one of our customers who are experiencing 28x growth over the last 2 years. And all that data footprint we're managing and providing savings by helping them transparently move colder data to cheaper disk, cloud, and tape. So I hope you got a good overview of who Komprises, of what we do, how we're different in that we manage your data at scale and simply provide a solution that's easy to deploy, easy to grow, and gives you analytics into what's happening in your environment and manages data based on that with intelligence. If you like what you saw and you'd be interested in trying this out in your own environment, please contact sales@komprise.com or sign up for a free trial on our website, and we'd be happy to work with you. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you got a good overview of what Komprise does from this presentation.